This is Stateside. I'm April Baer. August's Democratic primary election in Michigan has captured national media attention. Voters and analysts are expecting to learn a lot about the mood and temperature of the Democratic Party with the outcome of the primary for an open U.S. Senate seat. The two leading candidates are Congresswoman Haley Stevens, who represents a swath of Oakland County north of Detroit, and Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, who's worked in public health for Detroit and Wayne County. We'll be talking with El-Sayed tomorrow. Today, Congresswoman Haley Stevens. Haley Stevens, welcome.
Thank you.
Having experience gives a candidate an edge often over opponents, but there are candidates who benefit from outsider image. Is there anything that you would want to say to voters who maybe see you as more of an establishment person rather than someone who has their best interests at heart?
Well, I'd say that the time that we are in right now is so very serious. And what led me to putting up my hand to run for United States Senate instead of staying comfortable in the House seat that I was in, that I could have run for re-election in, is because a fully paralyzed veteran reached out to me last year when he saw Elon Musk with the chainsaw and asked if he was still going to get his benefit check. A Michigan fully paralyzed veteran. It's not the time to be comfortable. And it's also the time to be engaging in our country's democracy, the deliberations for who's going to stand up and fight for us. I think this has been a really healthy and incredible process. And it's been important for Democrats as well.
I want to ask you about an issue that has been very concerning to a lot of voters, immigrations and customs enforcement, and also Customs and Border Protection actions to implement the Trump administration's mandates. Some candidates have called for abolition of ICE or CPB or CBP, and you're one of those who actually calls for reforms rather than abolition. Well, what issues should be addressed first?
Yeah, look, I don't think slogans or shouting into the bullhorn totally gets us out of this mess. We need to tackle head-on accountability. ICE agents from top to bottom who have committed crimes need to be held accountable. I have legislation to create a special prosecutor to do that. I have also used my current position to stop the funds that are going into this corruption and abuse of power. $70 billion in a taxpayer slush fund was put to ICE, while food benefits, healthcare benefits were slashed. Michiganders do not feel safer. They are outraged. Our neighborhoods are witnessing things that they never thought they'd see. I hear this all over. Baldwin ICE detention facility, privately owned, monies that have gone in there that are now funneling into Republican campaigns. So obviously not another penny more, and a dramatic overhaul, but also prosecutions. And this is stopping Donald Trump's ICE. This is the charge that I am putting forward.
Let's move into an aspect of foreign policy. The war in Iran and some of the previous engagements that our allies have had in Gaza and Lebanon have raised questions about the degree to which U.S. foreign policy and national security priorities are being kept separate from those of our allies, in this case, Israel. What would you say to skeptics who may believe that you are not the person to influence the relationship?
Well, look, Donald Trump has been completely out of control. He's got Napoleonic visions globally. He started an illegal war in Iran, totally outside the bounds of the Constitution. Americans, Michiganders, do not want that war, are paying the price for that war. And in terms of what motivates my work in the Congress and what is motivating my run for United States Senate, it is to push back on these abuses of power from Donald Trump and to make sure that Michigan is heard and getting a fair shake. We are getting screwed by Donald Trump's erratic tariffs, a rejection of proven 21st century industrial policy. Now, you mentioned Israel and longstanding Democratic alliance and some deep frustration around the failure of the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netenyahu, to bring us closer to the goal of peace. He has failed in that regard. and it needs to be called out. And we also need to continue to push for humanitarian aid, rebuilding of Gaza and Lebanon, and a two-state solution that brings peace and dignity to Palestinian people who have suffered tremendously because of this war and because of Hamas's leadership. And it's all a big mess over there. And I have some disagreements with the person I'm running against in the Democratic primary, Abdul. He doesn't want a two-state solution. He equivocates around Israel's right to exist. I don't think that brings us further to peace. I think we need a two-state solution. That's how I'm always going to use my vote.
The American or Israel Public Affairs Committee, or AIPAC, has spent a lot in this primary and has spent directly $9.3 million in support of you as a candidate and a total of $15 million on the race to this point, and we're only in primary season. What would you say this says about how AIPAC views Abdul and yourself?
Look, I'd say this, that anyone who's individually supporting me and my campaign is doing so because of my track record around fighting for Michigan, delivering for Michigan. There is a huge and an extraordinary problem in our country with outside money. This has been going on for a very long time. When I first ran for Congress, the only, quote, outside money that got involved was through party committees. And now we're at a place where we see outside spending from a variety of groups. Abdul has a super PAC run by his father-in-law that has an FEC complaint. I'm being completely transparent with voters about my tax returns, about my personal financial disclosure. Abdul's campaigning on money out of politics, money in your pocket, except for he made hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars last year, putting him in the top 1% of Michigan earners. And we don't know where that money's coming from. Who's paying him for these speeches? Why can't we have transparency? And so, look, it's a slightly different point than what you're getting at, which is Mike Rogers is not going to end Citizens United. Mike Rogers is going to continue with the status quo. Our democracy needs to be saved. I want to do that. This is why I have been putting in reforms and voting and co-sponsoring legislation. And I'm being entirely transparent with the voters of Michigan about what I want to do when I get to the United States Senate and who I am. I'm a public servant fighting for us.
You didn't feel pressed to return donations from AIPAC or maybe other groups. I understand that the campaign cannot control money that's spent outside of your own coffers. But you did not feel moved to return any of the donations, even when they've been questioned?
I have received tremendous support from individuals across Michigan. I'll tell you that there was an event with a women's event with the party, primarily around Black women, and I was attending. I was excited to be there, and a gal approached me and she said, "I brought this for you," and it was a check for $100, and it was what she could contribute, what she could give, and that's where 92% of my donations come from. I really encourage everyone listening to go on to fec.gov, look at who's donated to my campaign. I'm proud of how I've approached my campaign, how it's grassroots, and how my sleeves are rolled up, and how I've run all my campaigns.
Haley, can you give us an example of how you have opposed the Netenyahu administration's policies in your time in Congress?
Yeah, well, I've certainly stood up for the folks in the Palestinian community in the West Bank and called out some of the extreme settler violence. But most importantly, the deep work I've done in the Congress, very unlikely situation that I fell into with my constituent Paul Whelan, who was taken by the Russians. And Paul is an incredible individual. started engaging in hostage efforts across the Congress. I'm the co-chair of the hostage task force. As we know, on October 7th, hundreds of innocent civilians, 9 Americans were taken by Hamas, put into tunnels, and I worked regularly with colleagues. I led a resolution 414-0. Every voting member of Congress joined me to condemn Hamas' call for the release of the hostages. Those families, some who were American, deeply frustrated with Netanyahu, deeply frustrated with his government. And I joined them in that frustration. I worked tirelessly alongside them on behalf of our country, our Congress, and free and fair people who did not feel as though their government or a government was working effectively on their behalf. I really encourage voters and listeners to, if this is an area of interest, to look into that more. I could talk on, but I will tell you that this is another example of where folks felt failed by Mr. Netanyahu.
Let's bring it back around to domestic matters. As you know, data centers are in the works in many communities around Michigan. How do you think the federal government should change the way it regulates data centers or AI processes more generally?
Well, look, Michiganders are getting the short end of the stick, and it's not acceptable. And I have joined them in leading legislation to hold DTE accountable to lowering rates. And if they're not going to do it, they're going to lose federal funds. Data centers are being built off of the backs of our hard work and our taxpayer dollars, and our rates are only going up, and it's not acceptable. And I am calling it out now. I'm leading efforts now to support hardworking Michiganders, and I plan to do that only in a bigger and more ferocious way from the United States Senate.
Would you support a moratorium?
Well, look, as a federal lawmaker, I'd have to see the legislation. I don't know what exactly that looks like, not in part because I'm trying to shapeshift. This is a state issue. This is a local issue. I don't like making false statements that actually can't be achieved from my role. I thought it was interesting what New York did, which is they did a 1 year to say, hey, let's get all of this stuff right. Here's the other problem, though. We have 50 data centers already built. So, and I see Donald Trump gutting the Environmental Protection Agency. I see the Great Lakes Water Authority without the resources to build new pipes. What the heck's going on here? So I'm going to fully fund the personnel for EPA and water safety and safety in and around our communities so that Michiganders are protected. So you can say a moratorium. That's interesting. But what do we do about the ones that have already been built?
Let's talk about healthcare. As you know, there's been some churn in the incentives that have supported the Affordable Care Act. And the result of that is that Michiganders are paying a lot more for their health care packages when they're self-funding, if they're paying for them at all. A lot of people have just dropped out of the Affordable Care Act market. And costs for other health plans supported by employers are also up. Is there legislation you would propose or support that would fix a healthcare system that a lot of people experience as broken?
Yeah, Michiganders haven't just dropped out, they've been pushed out. And they have gotten screwed over by Donald Trump. And the tax bill that gave $70 billion to ICE, gave a tax write-off to billionaires, and slashed the tax subsidies. We can also look at what's gone on with Medicaid, which has been unconscionable and wrong. I want to see us expand Medicaid. I am very proud to have taken on pharmaceutical and drug companies to cap the price of prescription drugs, particularly insulin, at $35 a month. And I'll tell you about a Detroit restaurant owner who I was talking to the other day. I was asking about his health care because I know that restaurants are small businesses and they a lot of times are strapped and not able to offer health care to their employees or even to themselves, and they go on the exchange. And I was asking him what he wanted to see. And he told me, he said, he goes, I don't know if I'll ever believe it to see our healthcare system get fixed. That is a darn shame. have a deep background in industrial policy, manufacturing policy. I stood behind President Biden when he signed the CHIPS Act into law. I played a lead role in getting that legislation done, and I'm darn proud of it. By the way, there was tons of investment into STEM equity and equal education opportunities in that legislation, something that Donald Trump has now completely cut. Why is our healthcare system so complicated? Why? Why not say that $100 a person every year? I mean, add that up.
Am I hearing you in support of single payer?
Look, I'd say this, that we've got to work within the system that we have, but we got to stop these big insurance companies from robbing us blind. And there's one path, that I spend a lot of time talking to stakeholders about, and it is this deep frustration with insurance companies. I think going into litigation and lawsuits and more disruption may not be the answer. But I will tell you, the Medicare challenges of who gets signed up and how they get signed up, and if they don't do it in the right window and then they're left without the proper coverage, Social Security recipients seeing a slight cost of living increase just to see their health care costs go up. Something is deeply broken here. Quality and access and affordability is very key here. I want this American experiment to work, but right now it is not.
There's a question that we probably could have spent this entire time talking about, and that is just the cost of living in Michigan right now. What can one senator do to bring costs down?
Well, look, again, I'm not in the business of slogans. We all know that the costs are too damn high. Here are our indicators. 60% of Americans now living paycheck to paycheck. Something that I have been eyeing for the last handful of years is the ballooning consumer debt and default rates. As someone who was in the Department of the Treasury during the Great Recession, working on the auto rescue, which was across the hall from the home ownership affordability and saving people's homes office, I will tell you that this keeps me up at night. How I lower costs, I believe, has to be a multi-pronged approach as a U.S. Senator. Here's what I'm offering to the people of Michigan. No tariffs on groceries. I started talking about this, and you immediately saw the administration start to take those steps. That needs to become law, because those grocery prices and our farmers who aren't getting any benefit from it, it's wrong, and we can address it. 2, the taking on these utility companies, Prolonged Power Outage Relief Act. I've got that legislation. I've had it for years. Wrote it to provide relief and to take on these utility companies when they're raising rates. We just have to get aggressive. I cannot see Michigan residents continue to get double taxed. 3, big, bold bill that I have, Unearth America's Future Act. Lessen our dependence on China for critical minerals and components throughout our supply chain, create jobs here, and lower costs because we save on shipping. That's real industrial policy, not this crap we're getting from Trump, which is taking on Canada when he promised to take on China. That's also raising rates. Let's be very clear. Small business revenues in Michigan are down 40% in a lot of communities because of this trade war with Canada.
Last question. Haley, the available polling we have show you ahead of your primary opponent at this point. However, a statistically significant number of voters are still undecided for August's primary. Voters with less information may just be waiting in, maybe looking at the socials to see, what you stand for and what you're like. There have been clips circulating with tone and mannerisms where you are definitely fired up. Some might even say a little over the top. Is there anything that you would want to say to people who are just getting to know you in this way at this stage of voting?
Well, I have no problem laughing at myself. I've been having some roll on the floor laughing moments with some of my best friends about clips circulating on the internet. And obviously, it's no laughing matter what we're going through in Michigan. But I am an extrovert's extrovert. I really thrive off the energy of people and what our state is all about, and connecting with people. And look, as voters are making up their mind in this Democratic primary, I win primaries and I win tough general elections. That is what I have done time and time again. And so it is very humbling It is very energizing for me to go out there and earn the rest of the remaining votes. It's amazing that we've got this absentee process in Michigan. I feel very strongly about voting rights, ongoing civil rights, and what is on the line. Mike Rogers will be a roadblock. I will beat him. I will eat his lunch and breakfast and a little bit of his dinner on all these issues, and together we will make Michigan shine.
Rep. Stevens, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.